I am of the belief that the line between good and evil runs through every man's heart, such that if us, all of us wonderful, not rich people, were placed into positions of power, we would behave identically to the people in those positions of power. And I'm curious if you see that too, or if you think that there are really two different kinds of people, the greedy ones that just want everything for themselves, and then other people that just want a fair chance at life.
Not at all. Greed isn't, I don't think there's anything wrong with greed principally. Mm-hmm. And you're completely right. If we were to flip the switch and everybody who was born to a single mother in like inner Brooklyn ended up getting put in the position of like, stockholder, kingpins on Wall Street and vice versa, I think fundamentally you'd get a little bit of a mix up, but after a month, everything would stay exactly the same. Mm-hmm. That's what I was talking about vis-a-vis material conditions. People act in predictable ways in predictable situations. I don't want to flip who's in charge. I want to change the way people can be in charge. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, you're completely right. There are plenty of terrible, awful, like poor people, and there are virtuous, wealthy people. I don't like it when people make this a matter of moral essentialism. Sometimes you hear this with cops too, like all cops are bastards. There is a line of reasoning to that argument. Like if you're a cop, you're participating in a bad system, period, regardless of your individual moral virtue. But some people, they take that to a point and they're thinking like, every individual cop is personally like a bad human. And that's very strange to me. Because cops, I mean, they're subject to the exact same set of material pressures as the rest of us fundamentally. They're working class. A lot of them got to where they are because being a cop is one of the best paying, like middle class jobs you can get in a lot of these dying Midwestern towns, So was there like a curse on the badge that, was placed on them? Like what, for me, the argument should be very hard on systems, be easy on individuals. We're all struggling. I think the systems are the things we should be so concerned about.
Got it. Yeah. So I think this kind of one of the questions that I have, because I've been thinking about charity and giving, and I believe you're a consequentialist. Is that correct? I was watching your Politics 101. Before I ask my question, how do you characterize the way that you think about morality? Is it pure consequentialism? Is it something that needs to be added to that or subtracted from it?
Yeah. So I think that moral value comes from action. I don't think it's about people. I don't think it's about like necessarily intention. It's just you do good things or you do bad things. Mm-hmm. And what you get is a really complicated set of like overlapping consequentialist arguments where a person isn't good or bad. They're the sum of the good or bad things that they do, but you want them to do the bad things they do with good intention because it makes it more likely that you could persuade them to do good things in the future. Mm-hmm. And it gets really complicated. And I mean, to be honest, if I were to argue it for more than 30 seconds, I would belie a significant ignorance of philosophy. But generally speaking, one thing that really bugs me, politically minded people, they argue out of principle. I don't know what that means, out of principle. To me, my principle is you do the things that are good and you try not to do the things that are bad. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, they seem, I got this argument all the time when it was like voting for Biden or not voting for Biden. It's like, to them, there are acts which endow the actor with moral virtue or with the opposite. And the ones which are most virtuous are the ones which should be pursued, but you do it not for the sake of the action. You do it for like the individual merit. These arguments get really, really complicated, but I'm sorry, I'm way off the weeds. Yes, I'm consequentialist. I think that generally speaking, we should measure moral worth by the consequence of what takes place after we do a thing.
Interesting. So I think this is where I sense we disagree the most. With all the socialism stuff, I didn't understand it, but I think I'm very much on board, and I can just...
Yeah, you have a unique brand of socialism, mm-hmm. which is interesting. I mean, it's a shame, I think, with words, people like just have their own definitions, and so often you'll hear someone say Black Lives Matter, and that means 100 different things to 100 different people. And you'll say, I'm a socialist. And that can mean anything from, I want 75% tax rates for everybody who makes over 20 grand a year, or it can mean I want democratized businesses.
Yeah,
so
people, it's some of it is a matter of misrepresentation. Obviously, the mainstream media doesn't give socialism a particularly charitable rap. A lot of it is also, I think, people like placing different value on different aspects of advocacy for socialism. A lot of this was spelled out 150 years ago. Marx said it himself. I mean, Marx, the people will say like, communists are all about equality. Marx didn't give a damn about equality. He specifically wrote about it. He didn't care at all about equality. What he cared about was freedom. He thought that in a society which would get the greatest amount of individual freedom, that people would, of their own volition, arrive at whatever life paths were deserving of their personal characters. I think that's an agreeable argument. It's the same reason why libertarianism was originally a left-leaning idea. So, but nowadays people associate socialism with big government and communism, or sorry, and big government and like authoritarianism.
Yeah.
It all gets so strange. To be fair, by the way, there's another big element to socialism that we haven't discussed, which is like the decommodification of industry, which gets into its own whole thing. But I think most of those arguments are pretty agreeable as well. Do you like Medicare for all?
I don't know. When it comes to policy, I throw my hands up in the air and go, I don't know. But I actually do think there's, when I've listened to you, the foundational thing that we have in common is that if you think of the hierarchical pyramid, I want to see that bottom level raised, even if it means shaving some off the top. I don't know that I'm ultimately for like flat as possible, because I think that I would like different decisions to lead to different outcomes in terms of what people can get. So Medicare for all, I think, will eventually be as obvious as clean drinking water in much of the developed world. Like, we already have socialism. We have Medicare for all.
In some form. Like, it might be UBI. It might not be Medicare.
Yes. I think people, it's funny when we talk about Medicare for all and we just gloss over the fact that we have it in the form of clean drinking water, right? We've provided a baseline level of taking care of our populace as just obvious and given and a human right. And then we go, oh, but no further. It seems kind of silly.
And just as important is removing that baseline taking care of people from market forces, because that's one of the big things. This is the capitalist argument, by the way. You could read this out of Adam Smith. This is not Karl Marx saying this. Capitalism functions best when we're talking about commodities which can be exchanged along an elastic price curve. You want people to be able to make informed decisions about the product that they're buying, but that system breaks down on certain commodities. So, for example, if you price a video game at $1, single dollar, everyone will buy it. $1, easy. You price it at $1,000, very few people are going to buy it. The system works. But say insulin, how high you got to price insulin before a diabetic person's not going to buy it? They'll pay anything. They're dead if they don't get it. So the price curve breaks on something that essential. And you find the same with things like education, transportation, water, food. These are systems where market forces tend to impede efficiency and like meritorious distribution of wealth and resources. So the argument for these things would be, and that's what Medicare for all does by removing private insurance, is fuck it. Just make these things free. Pay higher taxes, make these things free. The market forces don't work on them. We know our American healthcare system is broken. We've already done this with education. Some cities do this with transportation. We are capable of doing this. It's just a matter of the decision being made by the people who actually need these systems, as opposed to the people who profit off of their current dysfunctional status.
What do you think about the cutting edge of innovation needing to have market pressures? For instance, so take insulin. I don't know, however many years ago it did not exist. If I am a selfish person entering into the medical field and you tell me that I have to charge a wage or a price that people can afford for something, I might redirect my efforts to something else that just personally earns me more money and thus not pursue innovation which would develop insulin. So do you think that there's a time period or a cutting edge that needs to have those market pressures where there is price gouging and there's tons of money to be made? Or is it...
here's my trap card though, right? First of all, a lot of these big pharmaceutical developments are done through public funding. Like the research is done through grants you get from the government. They're done by university professors and the like. But that's not all of it. You say, let's talk about the private sector, right? So here's the kicker then. In the private sector, in the way things work currently, the people who profit from big pharmaceutical innovations are CEOs and stockholders. In a democratic economic society, if you are a scientist, a researcher, and you develop one of these things and you develop some pharmaceutical innovation, you're on the hook for that. Right now, the credit gets taken by the company. In a democratic system, it's the individual, the person who actually makes that leap, or the team more likely, it's very rarely an individual, who actually gets the glory, and more importantly, they get the money for it. My argument would be that in a democratic economy, it's actually a better incentivizer for innovation, because the fruit of that innovative labor goes to the people who innovate and not to the people who own the labor of those who innovate.
Yeah, and the only question is, where does the capital come from for all the, you know what I mean? Because like I could be a brilliant scientist, but I'm going to need $50 million to
for Medicare for all, I assume the government would buy. I mean, right now, if the pharmaceutical industry makes something cool, usually the government does end up buying like right now with the COVID vaccine, like we bought millions and millions of Pfizer vaccines from that German company, well, from Pfizer.
Yeah.
And the two who made it were these Turkish immigrants, but everyone just talks about the company, Pfizer. These people made it. I say scientists are workers too, innovators, entrepreneurs, inventors. These people they're workers.
Oh, for sure.
I think that they should be afforded the greatest possible respect for what they do.
Yeah, and all I was saying is that like let's say that you're doing SpaceX, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a scientist who figures out how to land a space shuttle back. You know what I mean? So you launch it up, you land it back. This is game-changing technology in a democratic company. I won't even say a socialist company. In a democratic company, that person would get compensated for it. But you would also compensate the person who put $200 million on the line to make that happen, which is to say the company would, within itself, negotiate terms. Some of the upside is going to go to the scientists. Some of the upside is going to go to the person that provided the capital and made it possible. And they can figure it out themselves within their organization. And I like that.
Oh, absolutely.
The only thing I don't want is
would certainly be more favorable to the innovator, to the scientist, because in a democratically run economy, they would have had a say in the drafting of these contracts to begin with. Right now, the priority of any given firm is to draft contracts which benefit the CEO, the stockholders, to the greatest possible degree.
More beneficial to the scientist than today would occur, or more beneficial to the scientist than to the person that puts up the money at risk?
Than today. In anything like space.
No, makes total sense.
The one part that gets left out. Sorry.
No, the one part that just sometimes gets left out is like, there is actually value to someone giving you $200 million to experiment in technology. And you
of course. It gets really complicated because nobody, like, we aren't whittling statues out of like logs of wood that we find in the forest. You know, like obviously anything, especially something as complicated as pharmaceutical technology or SpaceX, is going to involve literally thousands of people down the supply chain, from people in the third world who are making the metal that gets shipped to America to be assembled into the rocket, to the geniuses who are developing these formula. And, you know, I don't know what they do with SpaceX. I'm sure it's very complicated, but it all gets very complicated. Yeah. And I guess I would rather the complexities be decided by everyone than the complexities being decided by people who have all the power and the greatest incentive to make the most amount of money from the labor of everyone beneath them. You know?
Sure. Yep.